It's been called Ohio's largest corruption case, and it's been a court date that's been years in the making. NBC4 State House reporter Natalie Fahmy joins us with what you need to know about this case. Natalie.
Sierra, next week, two former high-profile politicians in the state are being tried for alleged corrupt activity that includes bribery, and it's all tied back to a piece of legislation that's still partially law.
We are still living with the consequences of House Bill 6.
House Bill 6 is a piece of legislation that was used to bail out First Energy nuclear and coal plants, led by former Speaker of the House, Larry Householder.
When House Bill 6 actually passed, the bailout included not just a nuclear bailout, it also included a bailout for two coal plants, one not even in Ohio. Ohioans on their electric bills pay for these, continue to pay for these coal plants.
While the legislation was being created, money was being funneled into a nonprofit called Generation Now, which was allegedly being run by Householder. First Energy has already pled guilty to its role in the bribery scheme.
First Energy has pled guilty to using dark money, secret money nonprofits to advance the careers, get folks elected that supported the bailout of the nuclear plants.
Householder and the former chairman for the Ohio Republican Party, Matt Borges, are being charged with racketeering,
which means a criminal enterprise engaged in a pattern of corrupt activity. The pattern of corrupt activity are the predicate offenses that are listed, and there's two separate types of bribery statutes.
While Ohioans are still paying for the coal plant buyouts, former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Ohio, David DeVillers, says it's an important case for other reasons too.
In a case where you're talking about, public corruption, you're talking about rule of law, and these are our leaders, these are our public officials, these are our office holders, they're our legislators, and when our legislators are passing laws that they expect us to follow, we need to make sure they're following the laws as well.
Opening statements for the case are expected to begin on Monday in federal court in Cincinnati. There will be no cameras allowed inside the courtroom and no live stream of the trial, but I will be there to provide coverage. Local for you at the State House, I'm Natalie Fahmy, NBC4.
Thank you. Although Larry Householder is the face of the House Bill 6 scandal, he will not be the only person on trial next week.
Lobbyist Matt Borges is also accused in the alleged dark money conspiracy. And back in July of 2021, Borges did his first ever interview with that indictment with Colleen Marshall.
Yeah, and at that time he said he wanted not only to give his side of the story, but to put out what he called the truth of this scandal. And it's a story in which he sees himself as wrongly accused. Now he'll try to convince a jury that he is not guilty.
I think it's important to make sure that the other side of the story, the truth of this story, gets out there, and really the only person who can tell it is me.
Matt Borges recounted a rude awakening, an early morning door knock by FBI agents who handcuffed him, held him at the FBI office for 90 minutes, and then took him to the U.S. Marshal's office.
Kind of one of the first things I saw when I looked to my left was Larry Householder sitting in a jail cell. And I thought, well, it must have something to do with this. I really still didn't understand why they would have roped me into any of it, but that was kind of the first inclination I got.
Well, what did you think he might have done?
No idea.
But he soon learned. He was allowed to read the sealed indictment that alleges a complicated dark money scheme. First Energy accused of funneling $61 million through a nonprofit controlled by Larry Householder, known as Generation Now. Borges is accused of helping to pass out bribes.
Any of this notion that I was involved in some kind of agreement, a quid pro quo between the company and the legislative leaders or anything of that nature was just nonsense.
Larry Householder and Matt Borges, they allege, personally benefited from this fund. Did you benefit from that fund?
Like I said, I was a vendor on a project that was paid for, my services were paid for out of funds that came from Generation Now ultimately. I've never contested that. There were dozens of other people who were working on this project.
Borges says he was paid for legal services, admits he was lobbying on behalf of the nuclear plant bailout and against a voter referendum. He says the government will not be able to prove he was aware of or took part in any bribes.
They can't prove I laundered money. They can't prove I was, part of some grander conspiracy, that I had any knowledge.
But when you hear that First Energy gave $61 million through this effort, that this money was, whether you want to use the term funneled or not, that this money came to Generation Now to get a specific outcome, doesn't that sound like it's wrongdoing? Doesn't that sound like bribery and conspiracy to push forward their agenda and to get other politicians and lobbyists to back it?
Well, like you said, it's something that people are trying to make sound bad and sound maybe worse than it is.
It does sound pretty bad. And as Natalie explained, Householder and Borges are facing multiple felonies now, and if convicted, possibly decades in prison.